Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to session 408 of Humanity Rising. As we begin our session today, the second day on endangered species, which is being convened by Tom Eddington and George Caponelli, I want to just strike a note about the importance of dialogue. I've been reading David Grieber's and David Wingrove's book, The Dawn of Everything, which I heartily recommend to all of you. It's one of the most important books that's been ever written, actually, about the data on human origins. And it turns upside down most of the conventional thinking. And one of the points that they make in the book is that the research is that when we sit alone, we have a capacity for concentration that normally lasts about 7 seconds. And you can test this out in multiple ways. Just try to count to 50, say, for example. And somewhere along the way, you're going to just daydream, or you're going to go off in some, unless you're really, really concentrated. But they're making the point that when we're in dialogue with each other, not only is our brain brought alive, but we can maintain our concentration for hours if we're in dialogue. And I thought that was just a beautiful point to make. And it's very important for us to hold that in our world today, where we're seeing almost a collapse of civic discourse, because we're no longer capable, it seems, particularly in our industrialized world, of maintaining empathetic dialogue. And those of you who've read David Bohm on dialogue know that at the heart of dialogue is the willingness to be in a posture of unknowing. And that's, of course, David Bohm essentially quoting Socrates and Plato. Remember, Plato wrote in dialogues. Because his assertion, learned from his teacher Socrates, that it is in dialogue, one with another, that not only that we become more informed because we understand in the empathy of dialogue, in this posture of unknowing, that it's far more important to live in the question than in the answer. It's far more important to have truth pursued rather than truth possessed. You know, and this has been striking me many, many times. You know, we've got 408 sessions as of today. We've been traversing a pandemic for the last 18 months, since May of 2020. And we have heard many voices. We've had over 1,500 speakers. We've had virtually every conceivable major issue that is challenging the global community. And over again, I'm reminded of the importance of dialogue, of the importance of just reverencing other points of view, because in the end, the old Vedic image of the blind men and the elephant is probably the truest image of what it means to be human. We don't know what we don't know if we think that what we know is the whole thing. And so I just wanted to open up with that thought today, so that whatever you hear on Humanity Rising, whatever processes you go through as a result of what you hear, truth pursued. It's much more edifying to live in the question. To enable us to do that, let us pause, as we always do as we begin our sessions, just by centering ourselves and our bodies, and attune yourself for just a minute on your heart. And as your heart beats, as you feel your heart, think of someone you love. And the research shows that if you think of someone you love, attuning yourself to your heart, both people start to have heartbeats resonating together. That's the heart of dialogue. for just a minute. Dialogue with your heart, with someone you love. Thank you, everyone. It's always good to begin with a coherent heart. And now we want to commence on our second of 5 sessions on endangered species. We learned yesterday there's over 1 million species around the world that are endangered, including the human species. And Tom Eddington and George Caponelli have convened this session. Tom has founded the organization Endangered Global that's doing extraordinary work around the world. So Tom, George, I want to turn the program over to you with deep thanks for the stellar group that you're bringing to Humanity Rising to enable us to understand more deeply both the gravity of the crisis, but also the opportunities for biodiversity renewal. So welcome.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your opening comments. I so appreciate your emphasis on dialogue, and that's what we're looking to spend the next 90 minutes or so in. Joining us today, we have Dr. Sylvia Earl, Chair and founder of Mission Blue. We have Alex Cornelissen from Sea Shepherd, the Executive Director of Sea Shepherd. Dr. Gary Shapiro, the head of Orangutan Republic, and Dr. Laurie Marker, founder and executive director of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And Laurie's joining us from Dubai, Gary from Santa Monica, Alex from the Netherlands, and Dr. Earl from California. So welcome to our guest and panelists for this dialogue today. And George, it's as always, it's a pleasure to be collaborating with you. And I'll just share an opening comment that we'll be using throughout the week. And part of this dialogue is about helping the viewers, the audience, understand what's happening in the world, but also what they can do. And so I'll start by just sharing that there are approximately 850 bioregions on the planet that are providing habitat for Earth's biodiversity. And the 6th mass extinction that we're experiencing now, it can actually be stopped by protecting and interconnecting nature in approximately 50% of each of these regions. And so what we want to be talking about, particularly today with the roughly 1 million species on the endangered species list, is the work that's being done by each of our panelists, so that we have an opportunity to learn from their experience. So welcome, Dr. Earl and Alex, Laurie, and Gary. And George.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Hello, everybody. It is
on board.
Dr. Sylvia is with us, yes?
Yes, but it says that the host has stopped my video.
Oh,
You can turn it on now.
there you are. Yeah. Well, I just want to add a few things to what Tom has said, in addition to welcoming you and thanking you very much for your time and, above everything else, your experience and wisdom. There's no doubt about the fact that we are in trouble. There's also no doubt about the fact that there are paths that we can take to mitigate where we can't solve many of the issues. And as I shared yesterday, my inherent belief is that, unfortunately, we at the center, humanity, can be both the innovators as well as the destroyers and the troublemakers. And so one of the things that I hope we can accomplish today, in addition to learning more about your terrific work and what you have to share, is to identify things that everyone out there can do individually as well as collectively to make a difference going forward. And so with that spirit in mind and with Jim's heart-head coherence, I thought I'd read a short passage from Joanna Macy that I particularly love. It's called The Three Beings, and it comes from World as Lover, World as Self. We call first on the beings of the past. Be with us now, all of you who have gone before. You, our ancestors and teachers who walked and loved and faithfully tended the earth. Be present to us now so that we may carry on the legacy you bequeath us. Aloud and silently in our hearts, we say your name and see your faces. We call also on beings of the present, all you with whom we live and work on this endangered planet. All you with whom we share this brink of time. Be with us now. Fellow humans and brothers and sisters of species, help us to open to our collective will and wisdom. Aloud and silently, we say your names and picture your faces. Lastly, we call on the beings of the future. All you who will come after us on this earth, be with us now. All you who are waiting to be born in ages to come. It is for your sakes too that we work to heal our world. We cannot picture your faces or say your names. You have none yet, but we feel the reality of your claim on life. It helps us to be faithful in the tasks that must be done. So that there will be for you, as there was for our ancestors, blue sky, fruitful land, and clear waters. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start to just have each of you share a little bit about who you are and the work you've done in the world, and mostly what gives you hope for the future and for humanity. And Gary, I'd like to start with you. If you could share a little bit about your being the first person to teach an orangutan sign language and to communicate, the 40 years you've spent in Indonesia with the orangutans, and what you've learned from the orangutans, and what gives you hope.
Thank you, Tom. First, I'd like to just thank everybody for being here on the panel, and I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Sylvia Earl, somebody I've admired for so many years, and in fact, before I moved into orangutan work, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and I've been a certified diver for 55 years, and it's just an honor to be at the same table with her deepness. Thank you so much. I came to orangutans really, as Tom mentioned, with my passion to understand the psychology of orangutans from a linguistic perspective. I was academically educated in zoology and biology, but found myself crossing campus to the psychology department and learning about the work that had been done already with chimpanzees. And I thought I would take on a project at the Fresno Zoo in 1973 to teach symbolic communication to an orangutan there. And when I finished and found myself pursuing my PhD with chimpanzees at the Institute for Primate Studies, I was able to move over to the signing part of it, because previously it was using plastic symbols. But it gave me an opportunity to really understand a different species. And while I was there, I was given the opportunity to go to Borneo to teach sign language to the orangutans there. And so as a biologist and a zoologist, being given the opportunity to go to one of the most, biologically diverse places in the world was really astounding for me. And while I was doing the work teaching the signs to the orangutans, these are ex-captives, by the way, I found myself completely immersed and enamored with the forest and the peat swamp forests and the river systems. And so in parallel with my research on the language ability or the signing ability of orangutans, I was falling deeply in love with the biota, the creatures that lived in the Blackwater River, and in fact went back in the mid-'80s to study the limnology of the Black Waters on my own self-funded postdoctorate. So I got really intimate with the forest, became interested in preserving it because I have noticed, and while I was there, the forest was under assault by local people in making incursions into the protected area. We were seeing, of course, illegal logging around us at the time, and we saw the mining, the gold mining that was going on at the perimeter of the park, and it started to go inside the park. And so, this is what prompted me to take action and to create the first orangutan advocacy group. I co-founded it with Dr. Berthe Galdikas in 1985, called the Orangutan Foundation International. And then in 2004, after 19 years being the vice president, or 17 years being the vice president, I started with my wife, the Orangutan Republic Education Initiative. And now we are a foundation doing work in Indonesia, particularly in both Borneo and Sumatra, which are the only places where orangutans are found. So they're endemic to those two islands. And you asked me about what gives me hope. The hope is that those generations that are here today and coming tomorrow expect those of us here today to do a better job of managing our planet, managing the ecosystems and the species, as you point out, 1 million of which are endangered. And so I have hope that, just like Jane Goodall, that we can mobilize enough humans and raise their awareness to a point where they will take action at a large scale. So let me conclude my introductory comments that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And Sylvia, for you, if you could just share a little bit about your background and what gives you hope.
Okay. To accompany my remarks, I'm going to change my background to this and start with an observation by Don Marquis. And in his book, Archie and Mahitable, there's a little poem in there about a toad. I met a toad the other day by the name of Warty Bliggins. He was sitting under a toadstool, feeling contented. He explained that when the cosmos was created, that toadstool was especially planned for his personal shelter from sun and rain, thought out and prepared for him. A little more conversation revealed that Warty Bliggins considers himself to be the center of the said universe. The earth exists to grow toadstools for him to sit under, to give the sun to give him light by day, and the moon and wheeling constellations to make beautiful the night for the sake of Warty Bliggins. Rather than ask Warty Bliggins what the universe has done to deserve me, I asked him, why is it that you are so greatly favored? Anyway, here we are, the Warty Bliggins of the universe, thinking that everything is about us. I think I'm in the company of those who appreciate that we're just a tiny speck in an amazing universe. But Earth is an extraordinary miracle, a place that, unlike any place that we've so far been able to discover elsewhere, not only is blessed with an ocean, it's blessed with life. And the two are absolutely inextricably connected in terms of the planet we now have. Earth is more than just rocks and water. It's a living system. We know that, but we haven't fully integrated why that matters, why we have the best chance in all of the history of humankind, armed with knowledge that not only did not, but could not exist until right about now. What gives me hope? Well, I've been fortunate to actually be able to explore the blue part of the planet more than most. I mean, decades of being able to dive into the ocean. Go back 100 years ago, the ability to do what I've had the chance to do didn't exist. I mean, scuba didn't exist when my parents were kids, or even when I was a kid. I've come along at just the right period in time when not just diving in with face mask and fins, or to have the ability to take a little package of air with me to go down to the upper, 50 meters or so of the ocean, but actually to live underwater for weeks at a time, and to use submersibles, little submarines, to go deep into the ocean. My species, not I personally, now more than a dozen people have been to the deepest part of the ocean. Didn't exist the capability to do that when I was a child. The deepest place, 11 kilometers down, millions of people, again, on my watch, have access to the skies above, 7 miles, 11 kilometers high above. And again, some of our species have gone to the moon. We've sent probes even beyond our own solar system, and to look back and to see Earth in perspective. We know these things. That is cause for hope. The fact that kids are growing up knowing what Earth looks like from afar, knowing what our predecessors could not know about the loss of species, and more than that, about why it matters. It was in the 1970s that the concept of all of us and all of the other forms of life who share space with us on Earth, that we began to think of Earth as a spacecraft in a universe that is really not friendly to us. There's so many ways that we can perish. It's this place, Earth, is our safe haven. It's our island in the midst of an unfriendly universe. And perversely, unwittingly, we have gone about really destroying those very systems that make our existence possible. We didn't know that we could. We thought that Earth was too big to fail when I was a child, and a lot of people still feel that way. They don't get it. They don't understand that we need nature. We need the systems. We need our life support system, the water, the air, but the fabric of life that maintains Earth as a hospitable place in this beautiful but really hostile universe. So what gives me hope? Now we know. Imagine if we did not know. Imagine if we continued the same way that we've been going throughout our history, cutting the trees to turn them into something that we think of as more useful, to plant soybeans or cows or tobacco or whatever it is that we have destroyed the natural fabric of life to suit us for short-term interests, or clear cutting the ocean, thinking that everything out there is free, that we can take without paying for it. Well, we are paying for it inadvertently. What gives me hope? This conference, my friends, you get it. And protecting nature as if our lives depend on it is the key. For me, it's been a journey from this time when nobody could know what the kids of today know. They couldn't know. We didn't know. Climate change is now upon us. There are a lot of people who deny that it's happening, but okay, the truth will out. It is clear that if anybody who really looks at the evidence, that we are altering the nature of nature, and we're doing it with this belief that it's all about us. Okay, so if it is all about us, if it is just about having a future for humans, then we better take to heart what we now know, that our existence really depends on taking care of the fabric of life composed of, we don't even know how many species, 1.5 million, roughly, maybe it's getting close to 2 million individual kinds of creatures for whom we have given names. And maybe they're 10 times that number that we haven't yet identified. We don't really know, but we do know we have the capacity to destroy at a level that is unraveling the very systems that make Earth habitable for us. But lucky us, now we know. And we've got that knowledge and the power to protect nature. Early in the 20th century, national parks, some say the best idea America ever had, came into existence as a concept that we have the power to destroy, we also have the power to protect. And we began protecting land, water, wildlife, birds that we used to think only as something to eat, now have widespread protection. We're beginning to get it with the ocean. We think of fish only as good for something to be turned into products, measured by the ton, not even given the dignity of regarding them as individuals, the way we have come to regard orangutans, elephants, chimpanzees, bears, birds. The fish, we're beginning to get to the point of respecting them the way we've begun to respect creatures that we know somewhat more intimately. We're beginning to protect the ocean in ways that we started a century ago to protect the land. About 3% of the ocean is highly or fully protected. 97% of the ocean open for exploitation one way or the other, mostly large scale and even small scale fishing, taking wildlife and just thinking of them as products. Seafood is what we call ocean wildlife for the most part. But we're getting there. The organization I started a little more than 10 years ago is working with individuals, with communities around the world to identify critical areas, just as critical areas on the land have been embraced with care. Hope spots, hope spots. By 2030, the goal around the world is to protect at least 30% of the land, at least 30% of the ocean. By 2050, at least half of the world, land and sea, all of it, to be protected, again, as if our lives depend on it, because they do. And knowing this is absolutely the only cause for hope. If we didn't know, if you don't know, you can't care. And we haven't known why nature really matters, why the individual components of nature, old growth forests, old trees, young trees, beetles, butterflies, bees, you name it, insects of all sorts, life of all sorts, keeps us alive. Now we have to return the favor. So plenty of reason for hope now that we know.
Thank you. Alex, picking up on what Dr. Earl shared and the work that you're doing at Sea Shepherd and have been for much of your adult life.
Yeah, I was hoping you didn't pick me after Dr. Earl. It's always hard to follow up on her. But of course, Sea Shepherd has been fighting to protect the oceans for 45 years this year. For myself, I've been around for about 20 years this year. And I'm an activist. I started this work because I believe that one person can make a difference. And to give an example, my very first day on board, I joined Sea Shepherd in the Galapagos Islands in 2002. Didn't know much about ocean conservation. I just figured this was a very cool group that I would like to join the swashbucklers of the ocean and be the good pirates to protect wildlife from the bad pirates, as we always say. My very first day on board, I was lucky enough to leave the Galapagos at midnight, and we had some rare occurrence, bioluminescence around the ship. And in this bioluminescence, we saw 2 dolphins swimming with the ship like ghost shadows. This is something in my 20 years at Sea Shepherd I've only witnessed twice, the combination of bioluminescence with dolphins, and both times in the Galapagos. So my very first day on board, I witnessed this spectacular nature phenomenon. And then the next morning we got woken up because there was a long line inside the Galapagos Marine Reserve. And somebody needed to get into the water to free a turtle that was entangled with its flippers in the buoys of the long line. And before I knew it, I was in the water and freed this turtle and subsequently 2 more sharks from this illegal long line. And at that day, I realized that one person can make a difference. And, you just have to do it. And I think that's something that I always tell people, don't expect governments to do it for you. Don't expect organizations to do it for you. Take the initiative, be the activist and be the change. And that's something that, when you ask about hope, when I look in the eyes of volunteers or any activists around the world, and I see in their eyes that same feeling I had that very first day on board, knowing that you can actually make a difference, knowing that you can actually change things. When I see that in the eyes of activists, it makes me remember that first day on board, and it gives me hope that there are still miracles out there. People can still make that difference. You can still be that change. And I think that's very important to give to people. Don't ever think that you can't change the planet, because as it is, we need more activists. We need more conservationists. We need to change the tide. I mean, I'm in close to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, as you mentioned. My house is built 4 meters below sea level. So I'm very much worried about global warming, because probably my house is going to be one of the first to go. Luckily, I got 3 stories, so up in the attic, I'm safe. But obviously, we need to make sure that the current rate of destruction gets slowed down. Ocean acidification, coral destruction, overfishing, illegal fishing, but also, the pollution of plastic in the ocean. It just goes on. And all these areas Sea Shepherd is fighting in, all these areas we're seeing progress, but it needs to happen much quicker. We need more people to become more active. And I believe, we can change. I believe that humanity has it in its ability to make a big change and to actually change the situation that we have right now. And I think we have to. It's a matter of survival. If we want to survive on this planet, then we all have to really step up our efforts and make a change.
Thank you, Alex. And Lori.
Hi there. Those are all just great and inspiring talks from all of you. Thank you so much. And just going back and hearing your histories and, thinking back about how I got started. I worked for Cheetahs, and it's been almost 50 years that I first saw a cheetah and started working for them and with them. And my start really was at a wildlife park in Oregon, where I didn't know I was going to devote the rest of my life to trying to save this amazing species, the fastest of all the land animals. And today, Africa's most endangered big cat. And yet people don't know anything about it. They didn't know anything about it nearly 50 years ago when I started. And I wanted to know everything there was to know about the cheetah. And I found that as I wrote to people around the world, they'd say, well, when you find out something about the cheetah, let us know. We're losing them in the wild. They don't breed in captivity. They have a very short lifespan. So when you find out something about cheetahs, let us know. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. People have revered cheetahs for 5,000 years. They were an animal that kings, princes, and emperors had. Unfortunately, they loved them to near extinction. And when I came on the scene almost 50 years ago, I questioned why nobody in the world was doing anything to try to save the cheetah. And my history was very interesting. And as I think each one of you said, we all came into this at the right place, at the right time, for some unknown reason. And I always feel that I was sort of picked out of the air as some human that was going to do the right thing. And I've tried hard to give the cheetah the best that I possibly could. I ended up in Africa in the middle 1970s, where I found that farmers were killing cheetahs like flies. They were vermin, like all predators are. People saw them, they were killing them, mostly as a perceived threat to their livestock, but quite often because the people were not protecting their livestock. And so predators were out there, like the cheetah. And if they saw unprotected livestock, the predators will eat the livestock. An easy, quick meal. The predators, like cheetahs, and cheetahs like predators, aren't wanton livestock catching animals. They want an easy meal. And that's why working with people became such an important part of the work that I do, which is to try to find out why people were killing them. An interesting point with the cheetah that I always say is that it has made me think outside of the box. As Sylvia said, we started the game parks in the 20s. However, the cheetah is an animal that about 80% of all of the remaining 7,000 individuals are found outside of protected areas, because the protected areas are too small, really, for an animal like the cheetah that has one of the largest ranges on Earth. And so when lions and hyenas and leopards are all protected in those protected game reserves, the cheetah gets pushed out, and it's on areas where humans are and their livestock. And so what I tried to do is to find out why people were killing them and what could be done. And that started a very long process of working together with community-based programs and helping people realize that they're part of a problem. And it's not just problem animal, as we always call animals that are causing us problems. We are also the problem, and that we have to become the solution. And to become the solution, we have to learn what to do. But we're always afraid. The things that we're afraid of, we go out and we will kill, we'll destroy, because we don't know how important it is. But an animal like a top predator plays such a key role in keeping our ecosystems healthy. Where you do have top predators, you've got a greater amount of biodiversity. An animal like the cheetah feeds the entire veld. Every animal, from the lions and hyenas and jackals to the birds of prey to all the other small carnivores, as well as the insects. And all of those make up the biodiversity that keeps us alive. And yet with that, we're seeing the breakdown of our world because of the lack of understanding of how important each one of these species is. And so from that, for the last 30 years, when I set up the Cheetah Conservation Fund, we've been working to try to find ways of keeping the cheetah alive, working with people to try to understand that the fastest of all the land animals is in grave danger of going extinct. And I don't think the cheetah has 5 or 10 more years. In the 2050, we're not going to have cheetahs on Earth if we don't change what's going on. Our motto at the Cheetah Conservation Fund is change the world. save the cheetah. So in order to save the cheetah, the world has to change. And that's been a huge part of the work that we've undertaken. And that means working with rural farmers, looking at livestock management, looking at that impact on the earth, trying to figure out a gentler way to live on earth so that we can have it all. We are so lucky to live on earth. And every single day when I am out, I'm usually in Namibia, which is where our reserve is. And there we're caring for about 56,000 hectares of a landscape that's attached to an area that is close to 1 million hectares of land and see the cheetahs and their prey that are living out there. But it's all about taking care of it and working together with the people that are living on the land to help them be part of the solution. So the hope that I have is really the fact that people can be the solution. We are a problem. But if we are learned or taught what we need to know, and we embrace the fact that we are all on the earth together, that we will be the solution, I hope, in the very near future to see the world turn around so that we aren't going to lose so many of these iconic species. And the cheetah, being the fastest land animal, is leading the race in much of the extinction. And so we all have to think outside of the box, not just game reserves, but to think how we are a part of nature, how nature is a part of us, and how we, in every walk that we do of business, of politics, of being human, of how we are finding a way that we're not going to let the million species that are on the endangered species list go, that we will make a difference to change the direction of life on Earth as it is today. And I really appreciate the work that you're all doing and this institute, because we're the kinds of people that need to go out and find more and share our stories more so that these species that we work so hard on to save will be saved for the future generations, those who are coming ahead of us, those that are not even born, who should have an opportunity of seeing these creatures that we have been living with and caring for. And so I do hope that everybody will join in on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. Thank you all. Part of the reason why we wanted to start with what brings you hope is we've got a generation, Gen Z, coming into the world who are experiencing extraordinary levels of anxiety, depression, self-mutilation, and suicide because they don't feel a sense of hope. They're genuinely concerned about their future and the world that we have given them. And so picking up on Dr. Earl's comment about at least now we know, we also know that to know is not enough. And so I'd like to invite us to unmute and have a dialogue around where are we and where are we going and what can be done and what are we doing?
I can start, if that's okay.
Yes.
I tell kids, you are the luckiest kid ever to arrive on Earth because of what is now known. Not everybody knows everything. Nobody can know everything. Nobody can do everything. But the basic knowledge is there. Knowing more than ever before about who we are, where we've come from, where we might go in the future. We once thought Earth was infinite in its capacity to recover no matter what we put in the sky, no matter what we did to the water, no matter how many creatures we killed. They would always come back, or even if they didn't, so what? We've got answers. We have the so what. And imagine if we did not know. This is truly the crossroads. And I'm not alone. We can see the danger we're in, therefore we can do something about it. I think one of the reasons for hope is not just the kids. And I say this as somebody who's been around for a few decades, so it's sort of a personal perspective. But people are living longer. We have a lot of elders on the planet. Going back even a century ago, people did not live as long. And so what difference does that make? Having lived through this most extraordinary time in all of human history, when we have learned more than ever before in a shorter period of time, at the same time that we have lost more. We're all witnesses to this extraordinary time. Those of us who've been around for more than half a century have this personal insight into how much has changed and how much we've learned. That's in itself, I think, cause for hope. You don't have to read it in books. You can know from your personal experience. Never before in all of human history has there been this collective awareness. We're in trouble and we can do something about it. What we do is now the challenge. How do we take this knowledge, this sense of urgency, this concern about the future that is perhaps unprecedented? So I have to look at the positive because I see that there are today more whales than when I was a kid. Why? Because we've done something about it. We haven't universally done all the things we should or could do to protect whales, but all things considered, you know, we're at a better place. Turtles, there are more sea turtles than when I was a kid. We came so close to losing many of the charismatic creatures, and in a lot of things that we don't even have names for are gone. So I think that the fact that we're having this conversation, that there's greater empathy for other forms of life. I've seen it with elephants. I've seen it with whales. I've seen it with birds. When I was a kid, eagles, you could get a bounty for killing eagles and owls and hawks because they're considered the enemy. As Laura, you talked about farmers looking at cheetahs as vermin, you know, you get a bounty for, or you're a hero for killing them. But now we're beginning to see ourselves in perspective with, again, there are only 2 billion people when I arrived on Earth. Now they're close to 8. And we're just consuming the very planet that keeps us alive. And understanding that we have to protect and care for the rest of life for the very selfish reason that it keeps us alive. And so I'm really inspired by the kids, but I'm also inspired by the likes of present company. You've all been around for a few decades and can see what kids have to learn. We've learned it the hard way. They've got it a bit easier because they've got this body of knowledge that they can draw upon. So here we go. 21st century humans were the luckiest ones ever to be around.
Yeah, I think we also have more opportunities. And now, I mean, there's so many groups you can choose from to become active in. I mean, when I only started 20 years ago, but there were far less possibilities there, options there then than there are now. So, I mean, if you really want to make a change, there are definitely possibilities. But I think it's easy for people to get discouraged because of so many negative news reports that are out there. And I really blame social media. I think social media has really been the reason why people are becoming depressed, because it's all about your persona nowadays. It's all about putting yourself out there. And if you don't live up to the expectations of others, then people get discouraged. And I think that's really important to acknowledge that social media is becoming a big problem for us. And I think that people need to step back from that and really start thinking about what is truly important. It's not how people perceive you, but what difference you can make.
I would agree with Alex about that. I mean, it's very, very clear that social media and this move towards everything becoming digital in our lives. I mean, we're so attached to our devices that we hardly have a chance to look at the real world. And those of us who have been blessed to be able to go out, like all of us have been, we need to engender that into this generation. And I think having organizations that allow for the uptake of volunteers is so important. And being able to promote this and to put the time and energy, this is what really gives me hope. You know, I've turned 70, you know, last year, and I'll be 71 this year. But I still feel like the kids that I'm working with, these younger, inspired activists, want to come and they want to participate, and we need to ramp that up on a larger scale, because too few people are actually coming on board in a big way, and giving them an opportunity to get knowledgeable about the issues, to be able to share that with their friends and colleagues is so very, very important. So I would hope that more organizations would have an opportunity to bring on volunteers to do exactly what Alex is talking about, to take the knowledge that we have, as Dr. Sylvia has mentioned, and to, you know, infuse them with this inspiration to get out and do something besides thumbing through their social media feeds. We really have to do this in a bigger way.
My solution to this is no child left dry. Get them out there, you know, play in the mud puddles, climb a tree. Or if you're so lucky as to be able to look at a cheetah or an orangutan in the eye, it's their perspective on us that really matters more than what your social media network thinks.
Yeah, I guess we're all privileged from our history, from what we've been doing for many, many years. But then again, we all worked to get to this point, and we all took the opportunities. So they're certainly there. So I think everybody should just think about it. And, you know, when I'm a resident of the Galapagos Islands. When I go back to the Galapagos, where I spent some of my time, not nearly enough, but I feel so lucky to be able to be there. And then I think, how did I get here? And the whole passage, 20 years, led me to that location, to that privilege of being there, of being a resident of the Galapagos Islands. And it just makes me realize, like, why, if I can do it, everybody can do it. Really, it's there. You know, take the opportunity.
But you don't want everyone at the Galapagos Islands these days.
No. That was just an example. Definitely no.
But I do think, you know, that we need people and everybody to take an action situation. And so action is really what needs to be done. Even if you are, you know, on your social media can be used for betterment as well, if we use it that way, and what people can do to help. And, you know, it really is, you know, getting into the schools. And again, it's a behavior change. How are we more gentle? How can we utilize our natural resources sustainably? And what role can we play? We really do need to have a real action step. You know, are we going to our governments? Are we actually putting and working together with them in trying to develop sustainable programs? What are we doing with businesses? And so, you know, we've tried to look at all of those aspects because they're all so important. And so we can love nature like we've all had such an opportunity of being with it. And yet not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody has time to or has the inclination. And yet I think people, when they are touched by nature, they start thinking a little bit more. You know, our cities are so full that's good. We want, I mean, you know, if 50% of the world are in cities, that means some of our nature is being left alone. Although farmlands, I think, even though our farmers are some of our best conservationists, they haven't had the conservation mentality. And so again, we do have to look at not having monocultures out there and species. We really need to look at how we can integrate biodiversity into our lives. And those are things that, you know, are going to take changes of curriculum in our school districts. It's going to take changes of our policies within our politicians. And it shouldn't be contentious. It should not be something that it should be a baseline program that we're dealing with, not the right wingers or the left wingers. It's like the earth and the environment is for all of us. And we are going to be the ones that have to develop those programs. But we do have to be much more active and in trying to get these kinds of programs in place. And we don't have a lot of time with it. We do need, the young people, I love them when they go out and say, this is our earth. So come on, adults, do the right things. And we as adults have such a huge responsibility because we are the ones that are the leaders. And so, action steps are very important, but strategic action steps that are going to make differences very rapidly. And I think that a lot of these global conferences that have gone on have been very important. And it will be very important to see how those steps play out over the next year or two. I'm skeptical. I think that everything takes much more time when you put it into the hands of governments. And that's why I guess running an NGO, like you all are part of as well, we know that we can be very quick on the ground. We can change directions as fast as we have to, kind of like a cheetah, and we can try to get into the right place at the right time. So action and strategic planning, I think, is critical.
And I think, go ahead.
No, please, go right ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that taking action and doing it at the level that we can do it. And so, for example, this notion we can go to the farmers, and we're trying to do this, of course, in Sumatra and places like in Borneo, but throughout the world, I think part of the solution will be to educate and to empower the local people to be more productive in a healthy way on their plot of land, and to teach them to respect the wildlife that is in the protected areas at that interface. And we can see this around the developing world. This is really where the action is. We don't have to go to the big conferences and the governments to do this. It's really people to people, and it doesn't take a whole lot to do it. We just need to replicate it and find and stand up small groups of people who care, who will go out and work with those farmers and to teach them how to live sustainably on their land. And, that is just one of the solutions, but, also calculating the true cost of nature and the value of nature in these balance sheets. The Dasgupta report that dropped last year, if you have seen that, was a remarkable document that really showed that we are outstripping the value of nature, the capital of nature, at an unsustainable rate. And it's incumbent upon all governments and all institutions to start to factor the true value of nature in and not treat it as an externality. And I think that's an important part of it as well.
I also, I want to pick up on a few things that some of you have said that I think are, first of all, the work you're doing is extraordinary. If there were true medals for humanity that would be handed out after the time that each of you has spent doing what you do, you should all have them. But you have them by virtue of the work that you do and the joy that I read, and I'm sure many of our viewers do, and the passion that you have for your work. And you've identified some really wonderful ways that people can become involved. And I also encourage our viewers to pay attention to the chat, because there have been some outstanding suggestions flowing constantly of groups and organizations that you can get involved in. And I also want to remind you that every single day, each one of us has a chance to work extraordinary things in support of the species, of biodiversity, of the habitat, of humanity itself, in the decisions we make. the aspects of human life that are destroying the species, that are injuring our habitat, are things that we have an influence over. What foods do we buy? What companies do we support with our daily expenditures? Can we change some of those behaviors that can reduce the profitability and the importance of companies and organizations that are destroying our planet? We can make these choices every single day. What do we pay attention to? What media do we watch? Do we communicate our hearts and our desire? Do we, what do we do every day? When we think about taking a cruise on a ship that is going to dump garbage into the waters and whatnot, we have the ability with our expenditures to say to industries, stop doing what you're doing. And that's a way that we can each be environmental champions in our lives, on top of all the other remarkable things, volunteerism and getting involved and supporting the organizations that everybody that's on this screen and thousands more do. And it's why Tom started Endangered. And if you want to know more about that, Tom will tell you how to get involved in Endangered. But this is where we make a difference every day. And I don't want us to forget that.
Yeah, I think it's all about lowering your ecological footstep. People ask me, what can you do? Look at your own personal ecological footstep on the planet and try to minimize the impact of it. That's a very simple thing to do. You can look at your food choices. You can look at your transportation, the amount of plastic you use. But coming back to the oceans, Dr. Sylvia Earl already said it, that we talk about seafood. And let's talk about the objectification of the ocean, of the species in the oceans. We're talking about seafood. We're talking about harvest. We don't talk about individuals. We talk about metric tons. So it's all objectified. So nobody really sees the suffering that is taking place every day on the ocean. These animals are suffering when they're being dragged out of the ocean and suffocated on the deck of a fishing vessel. And that's something that we need to make. And of course, we as Sea Shepherd are doing that. We're showing that to our supporters and to people that like to watch our videos. We want to show them what is really happening out there. And that is something that people need to become more aware of. There's a lot of suffering going on at sea, that if that would take place on land, everybody would be up in arms against it.
It's happening on land and people aren't up in arms on it, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah,
not to
true.
maybe the
That
same extent, but we've seen it, and it's still not getting through. I don't know why, but so I don't know. Maybe we have to again. I think so much of it really deals with the economic side of it, as you mentioned. Where we can, who's buying the food, how's it. Where's the money going to? We all have those choices. I put on the chat that we're part of a group called Wildlife Friendly Enterprises, and that is a certification program that we've tried to get involved with local people, which could be also very useful where it's the product is certified, where communities are actually a part of the solution of trying to help a species. And so I think that also can be one of the ways. We're also, as an organization, certified as Forest Stewardship Council certification. And anybody who buys anything that's made out of wood, every product that's made out of wood should be certified. And then that goes to everybody to make sure that it is sustainable. So I think these are the kinds of programs that have to be much bigger for us to all succeed for what we're doing.
I would just follow on that in our case, about large scale palm oil, as how that has been affecting, say, not just the orangutan population, but all the biodiversity when large tracts of land are converted into monoculture. And we're a member of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. So we have a vote at the table. We speak out on behalf of the orangutan, which in fact is a proxy for all the biodiversity. And so it's really important that we continue to pursue efforts to make sustainability something that is truly accurate in what we're saying, because it's used in so many different ways. We want to make sure that the land can in fact be productive, but not incur on new forest area. We want to make sure that the local people whose livelihood depends on palm oil will do so in a sustainable way. So we don't want to vilify it, but we want to find that balance so that we can continue to allow natural areas to persist, and then also to go back where there's degradation is to rewild areas, doing forest rehabilitation, and maybe even in some cases returning wildlife to those areas. So working with the government, say in Indonesia, we're looking at solutions of helping to get large tracts of land as a concession, a conservation concession or a restoration concession, to piece it together in large landscapes that will provide refuge for thousands and thousands of species that are out there right now, and then to bring back the stragglers who are going to be disappearing if we don't do that. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that need to be done. The education is important as well. We are focusing on educating young Indonesian college students to go into the natural sciences rather than to business school, because we got to shift that whole group of graduates from being into those business as usual types to understanding the value of biodiversity, the role of these animals in the natural world from the non-government organization perspective. And so I'm very, very proud. We've already given out 216 of these multi-year scholarships at a very, and to do it at all the orangutan range provinces of Indonesia. We've built it out over 18 years and we're continuing to expand it. But again, I believe, as Dr. Sylvia Earl has said, we have all this knowledge. We need to impart the knowledge. We need to inject it into those populations who are really going to be the stewards of the wild areas of the future. You know, we're going to continue to be a highly educated society in the West, but if we don't go into these areas which need the help, we are going to really suffer in the long run. And we need to go and educate more and more people at the perimeter of the wildlands. So that to me is really very, very critical.
I heard President Obama remark that our highest priority must be to keep the world safe for our children. Well, he was thinking guns and things, but I take those words very much to heart. We have to keep the world safe. How do we do that? If I were the big boss of the world, I would say, pay up and listen up. Protect every bit of the wild natural systems that still remain. I mean, highest priority, and restore, rewild everything that we can. Why? Because our life support system is in trouble. It is changing owing to our actions. The water, the air, what we've created that seemed like such a good idea at the time, all these synthetic materials that are now coming back to haunt us, microplastics, nanoplastics in the air, the water, in whatever it is that we eat, whether it's vegetables or animals, the nanoplastics that are down to the molecular level are now pervasive in our life support system. So we can still breathe, right? I mean, it's not the way it was 1,000 years ago, but we don't have to wear scuba tanks when we go shopping. It's, you know, this is the best chance we will ever have to take what we've got. I mean, it's still the best hope in all of the universe. Earth still works. The systems that took 4.5 billion years to get into place It's taken us about 4.5 decades to significantly unravel. And you know, it's like taking the machine that's flying us through the universe, and we're taking out pieces, and we're doing everything we can, perversely it seems, to make our life support system come apart. But it's still working. We're still here. We're having this conversation, which in itself is cause for hope. And that connectiveness, that the social media that makes that media possible, also is a lifeline to be of knowledge, so that we're talking all over the world right now, sharing knowledge that each of us has taken a lifetime to put together, and maybe develop what you hope that the elders have, a little shred of wisdom, which is the distillation of all this stuff that we learned. Suddenly you can look back and say, well, what does it all mean? And how can you take the best of what we now know? And along with letters and numbers and music and art and the other things that we try to instill with our kids, this sense of empathy for life. Do unto cheetahs, you would have them do unto you. Do unto orangutans, do unto trees, do unto fish, do unto whales, do unto other humans, for heaven's sakes. There is this thread that runs through all of the great religions of respect, treating others with dignity. But it's not just other humans. That would be a really good place to start, but all forms of life. If you put yourself in their place and imagine the world from the perspective of a 1,000-year-old tree, or an earthworm, or anything else, a creature that lives in the deep sea. Most of life on Earth lives in the dark, all of the time, below where sunlight shines in the ocean. 97% of the biosphere is ocean, and most of it is cold, below rather warm water at the surface, except around subsea volcanoes where it can get pretty toasty. But most of the life on Earth lives in the cold, in the dark, in the deep sea. And the thought that it's taken years for me to really get my mind around is that's the engine that even today, despite industrial fishing and despite the rain of pollution from the surface, it still keeps us alive. That deep, dark heart of the ocean that shapes planetary chemistry, moves temperature of cold water and warm water around, maintains Earth in a habitable condition, and yet we still know so little about it. We need to protect all of the natural systems as a starting place, because we still need to know what we don't currently know and can't until we really focus on being able to get there. You know, only a dozen or so people have been to the deepest part of the ocean. Hundreds of people have been to the top of Mount Everest. So every time I get really inspired about what we know and how this point in time is so important, I think about how much we don't know and how much we are in ignorance, losing, just because we haven't thought about it yet. But still, this is the best time we'll ever have to take what we know, protect what we can while we still can. The precautionary principle, I've seen that in the chat. We should really be careful about and you're right, the idea that somebody else can do it, the policy makers, the governments make the decisions. No, it's the power of the almost 8 billion people, one times however many, move in one direction or another. We can do it if we all get kind of moving in the right direction. It's the only thing in the end that will work. It isn't laws. We have on the books some perverse laws that reinforce bad behavior, subsidies for taking minerals out of the earth, subsidies for taking fish out of the ocean, subsidies that reinforce really perverse agricultural habits that are catastrophic. Laws that were made when we did not know is now known. We have to fix the laws, fix the policies, but mainly look in the mirror and see what each of us can do every day that transcend laws, that really have to do with how we behave ourselves or not. Anyway, here we are. I'm so glad to be a 21st century human being and to be sharing space with the likes of you.
So each of you have spent so much time, most of your life in nature, and nature is an incredible teacher. One of the things that we learn from nature is systems thinking. And each of you, in how you have approached this dialogue today and your life's work, has been through that lens of systems thinking. And in the recently released Netflix film, Don't Look Up, at the end of the film, Leonardo DiCaprio says, "We had it all." And I would ask and invite each of you, as we're coming to a close in this conversation, from a change perspective, first people have to have the information, then they have to have the understanding of that information before we can expect to see behavior change. And with enough behavior change, there's norm change. So I would just invite each of you to talk about, how do we help people connect the dots? And using the systems thinking that you all use to live your lives and to pursue your work, how do we help individuals connect the dots to move from information to understanding to behavior change?
Well, Tom, I think one of the key things is that we have to get people to care as well, because understanding is not enough either. But to actually take it into their heart, to actually empathize, to realize, like Dr. Sylvia Earl was mentioning, be that tree, be that earthworm, be that orangutan, be that cheetah, and recognize that we're all one. We come from a common ancestry billions of years ago, and we are at a precipice where we've already entered this sixth extinction, mass extinction. We need people to kind of grasp that in a very profound way internally, so that they will be promoted to take action. Because I'm afraid that if they don't move into the direction of caring, they're going to be distracted by the next thing that scrolls across their screen. And we need to keep their attention with the dialogue. We need to continue to engage with them and to bring them along. And really, most importantly, recruit young people who feel the same way. And there are a bunch of them out there. We have a youth ambassador named Jack Dalton. He's an amazing young man who has his own, YouTube channel, and he's published books. He's 12 years old. He goes out to schools. He is like my hero. And this kid is 12 years old. We need more Jack Daltons. We need more young people who are going to inspire and get young people, the next generation, to care, and hopefully inspire the rest of us. Like, hopefully Greta has done some good to our generation, has obviously embarrassed us at times, but I think we need to sometimes wake up and to get to the point where we do care enough to take action. So that, to me, is really what we have to continue to do, is inspire young people to motivate the rest of us. And then we need to continue to push on our generation and the youth to the need to care to save these wild areas and these species. So again, it's about our survival. This is all connected to the web of life, and the biosystems and the biosphere and all of the ecological subsets require having multiple species as part of this web of life. And if we don't maintain them, it's going to fracture, and people need to care about that too. So to me, that is really the most important part.
Thank you, Gary. I couldn't agree with you more about caring and celebrating and encouraging young people. I think they're far more motivated than a number of people of older generations are, which is another thing we need to change. I think Michael Mead makes a wonderful distinction as people age chronologically. They fall into two categories: olders who calcify and elders who somehow or another continue the journey of learning and understanding. And for those of us who are listening, and I want to apologize to all of you on the chat. I know you want to play a much more active role in dialogues like this. And I want you to know at Humanity Rising, we're working on ways to make that possible. In the meantime, thank you for all of your incredible contributions. In leaving, from my standpoint, a question that I think we need to ask ourselves, each and every one of us, is what is enough? When are we going to listen to Bucky Fuller and his concept of sufficiency? Later in the week, Lynn Twist will be on to talk about sufficiency and more. If every time we make a decision, we ask ourselves, do I really need this extra toy, this extra whatever? Do I really need that much food? Do I really need whatever? If we don't start making these decisions now, the planet is going to require them of us in the coming years, and we're not going to like the world we're living in. Preserve, protect, regenerate now. And every time we do one thing, anything, ask ourselves, is that necessary? Does it contribute to the greater good? And does it somehow or another provide an opportunity for younger people and for those not yet born to come to this precious planet and have an extraordinary journey? Jim, Jim, are you still with us? Do you want to come back in and join us?
With pleasure. Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone. Boy, I feel kind of blown away, especially Sylvia. I hadn't taken in till you just said it, that 97% of life on Earth is in the cold and the dark. I just had this sense that everybody was in the sunshine, and for the most part. So I have kind of radically restructured my appreciation for the depths of the ocean, thanks to you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I think it'll come as a surprise to most people listening to this information.
Well, 97% is ocean, not all of it. Most of it is in the cold and dark, because light only penetrates, 1,000 feet or so, a little more.
Wow.
But below that, that's where the action really begins. Anyway.
Yeah, that's when where the action really is. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And Lori, your passion around cheetahs. When I was a boy, I just loved watching the nature shows on cheetahs because the gracefulness with the way they just bound across and being the fastest animal, and as most boys, we were just racing around all the time. We all aspire to be cheetahs one way or another. So thank you for bringing that in. And of course, Gary on the orangutans and the upper primates, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful mission that you have around just saving these upper primates in a place, like Borneo. I mean, just the passion that's being exemplified here is so intense, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank everyone. And you, Tom and George, for putting this second day together. And why don't, Tom, do you want to close us out today? Anyone want to say any final words?
I would just invite each of you to, if there are additional comments you'd like to share on how do we help humanity connect the dots and bring that systems thinking that each of you have. You're doing it in your work, you're doing it in your daily actions. And so I would invite each of you to just, if there's any final thoughts you have, Alex, the work that you all are doing at Sea Shepherd with the videos and the content that you're creating, in addition to the on the water activities that you're engaged in.
I'd like to add, I mean, we started 2 years ago. It was called the European Citizens Initiative. This is an official voting tool in the European Union. And our mission was to stop the trade of shark fins in Europe, because as you know, there's a lot of shark fins are still traversing through European ports and airports, even though shark finning is illegal according to the EU. We started this initiative pretty much at the beginning of the pandemic, which timing couldn't have been worse, because our plan was to go into the street and canvass and tell people about it. And so we ended up having to do it all digitally. And then in the last month, we actually surpassed our quota, and we actually made it. And that was all thanks to an amazing effort from a lot of groups that got together in the end and really made this go viral. And to me, that was proof that we can rally the people. We can get them all together, and we can make them all go for one and the same goal, and actually achieve our goal in the end. And even though in December I thought, I'm probably not going to make it, in January we did, and we squashed the numbers. And now we are able to go to Brussels in the next few months to actually present our case before the European Commission, and hopefully to stop the trade of shark fins in Europe, which will be a massive blow to the shark finning industry.
Good.
The final question I would just ask is for each of you, with the incredible work you're doing, the organizations that you represent, how can people support you in the work you're doing? What would be most needed and most helpful for each of you?
I think that for all of us who have nonprofits, certainly we would love for our listeners and those who are watching to visit the websites and to contribute in the best way you can. It doesn't have to always be monetary. Like I said, we look for people who have talents that want to contribute as a volunteer. Being involved in activities that are helping to contribute to the betterment of the world, it's something that actually improves people's health. This is well documented that giving of yourself for doing good work, especially if you're retired from your paying job and now you're looking for some purpose, working with nonprofits in whatever capacity that you can, and that you can actually take part of something that's going to contribute with some work product or just your energy to inspire others. That is really, really big. So I would say visit everybody's website, take a look at what they have to offer, contribute funds, contribute your time, go out. And I think like what Alex was talking about, try to live a sustainable life, try to make good choices in what you do. I think those are the kinds of things that everyday people can do. You don't have to travel across the world or, jump on a ship and save whales every day. But if you can do something that will reduce your carbon footprint or the impacts that you make in the world, not having to always go after the luxury, and perhaps take that money that you might have spent on yourself and help support a nonprofit. That is a big thing you can do.
I think you answered the questions for all of us.
Very well said, Gary. Thank you. That was very, very eloquently said. So,
well, I wanted to help you out too, Lori. I've been a big fan of yours. You say a few things like
and
that.
vice versa. I'm trying to save all the trees for the orangs too. They're one of my favorite animals. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah, wonderful.
and the gibbons out there. So thank you all so much. And together we can do so much. And I really want to thank, Tom for bringing us all together. And it's just great, I think, to be able to talk with like-minded people and to be able to envision what the world will look like if we could make it right. Behavior change takes time, but we've been at this for a long time. Now we need to see those behaviors go into action.
Well, thank you all. It's been an absolute delight to be in dialogue with you, to have you share your wisdom and all of your experience of your lifetime. So thank you. It's been a tremendous gift.
Thank you, Tom. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
It's so important to turn attitudes, feelings into action right now. We're at that moment in human history where every action counts, either for good or for ill. And we're all in this together. And I just encourage all of you to support whatever ones of the or all of the above that you've heard about today, because it's very important. And we at Humanity Rising, will be glad to have any of you back for updates from the field. Gary, when you finish your trip to Indonesia at the end of the year, come back on and tell us about it. Lori, Alex, would love to have you back. And I would also add the power of documentaries. I mean, when I saw Seaspiracy and The Cove, it was so powerful. So the messaging is out there, and we just need to pay attention to it and act upon what we know. So thank you, everyone. And tomorrow we'll have day 3. Tom, take a minute and just tell us about what's going to take place tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So tomorrow we're going to shift the focus from today of specific species to the planet. And we've got an incredible group of panelists, as we've had today, who will be talking about what's happening at the planetary level and the work that each of them are doing to address. And the way I like to hold it is climate change is one side of the coin, biodiversity is the other. And so tomorrow we'll be shifting our focus from the biodiversity side to the climate change side and the work that's being done there, and continue this conversation to help humanity realize that we can't keep flipping this coin willy-nilly, and that it's really important that we see the connection between biodiversity and climate change and the impact it has on humanity and the role that we can play in protecting and preserving this incredible spacecraft, planet Earth.
So that'll be tomorrow, everyone, on the 3rd day of our 5-day program on endangered species. I want to welcome everyone now to join our after chat group. You'll see the link in the chat. All you speakers are invited to join if you have a few more minutes. You received a link in the note that Matt Robertson sent to you with the Zoom link. It's an opportunity for people to just get to know one another and see one another on Zoom meeting rather than the broadcast, which we're on now, Zoom webinar. So the after chat is the next opportunity. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you all here again tomorrow, same time, same station on Humanity Rising. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Excellent session.